Hi friends, Josh from the Narrate team here. This weekend, Adam asked the question, what causes you financial angst? And shared examples from the Bible of those who dealt with the sheer weight of financial responsibility.
Hey, good morning. It's really fantastic to be back with you. So something happened at the 8:30 that I just thought it would be a fun story to tell this. So after the gathering, I always sit up here just to get off my feet just for a moment, and this younger guy came up to me, identified himself as a freshman at Carroll College, just moved here to play football from Portland, Oregon, which is like, if you're going to be from somewhere, that's a good place to be from, right? And so I'm like, so how did you get here? And he said, I grew up in the church. My dad is a youth pastor back in Portland. We were part of this church that was really about the community. And so I met Father Mark, who, if you don't know Father Mark, he's the campus priest at Carroll College. And he's quite a dude, like salt of the earth kind of a guy. And so he said, I was describing to Father Mark the kind of, what I grew up in and where I went to church. And so then I saw him again and he said, hey, are you going to church this Sunday? And I said, I don't know where to go. And he said, you need to go to Narrate. So then last Sunday, Father Mark he's like, I'll go with you. And so the two of them came to our gatherings last Sunday, and then here was this guy this morning. So, wow, it's kind of braggadocious, but I was just like, way to go. I mean, you all set out to create a community that wasn't about you, but was about them, whoever them is. And I often wish that you could sit in some of the meetings that I do. We're working on a couple pretty big things right now that would be Vision Weekend related, and I wish you could see that the goal of going, hey, let's just cause people to rethink the value of church in a post-Christian culture. And let's cause them to rethink that by just adding value to our community and making them recognize that we bring tangible good. It's happening. And that's not a braggadocious thing, I hope, so much as to say, like, it is continually humbling and honoring to be a part of all this with you. I almost sent you an email this week. And if you don't get my emails, you can, because who doesn't need more emails, right? I mean, we could all use more emails. I almost sent you one, that was a joke, and you didn't laugh. I almost sent you one that was going to say something like this, like, hey, we work really hard to create experiences at Narrate that are non-intrusive and very comfortable, and no matter where you're at with Jesus, but this week won't be one of those. And I was like, well, I can't send that because then you'll all go to the lake. So I got to warn you, the desire to create a conversation this morning is, I guess you get to be the judge of how sincere it is, but it feels sincere for me, and I don't think we need multiple weeks, but there is something that I want to get you talking about, and I couldn't mean that more literally than I do this morning, because it's such a complex conversation, but I think it's essential, and it's made all the more essential by the fact that we don't have this conversation. To me, it's hilarious. You can graduate from high school, and the implication of graduate from high school is you are ready to take on life as an adult. You can graduate from high school, whether it's the fine institution of Laurel or Helena or Roundup or some other prestigious private high school, and have never talked about this topic. You can go to college, and again, whether it's Ivy League or the glorious Montana State Billings like myself, you can graduate with any number of degrees and never have talked about this. You can go to grad school, Christian or otherwise, and still have never talked about this topic. And yet, the reason I want to talk about it is because not only is it crucial, but I see it not every day, that would be an exaggeration. I see it weekly, if not monthly, that so many of the meetings I have, that they affirm that by not talking about this, we are avoiding talking about one of the things that is the very center of human thriving. It's in marriages, it's in relationships, it's with college students. I recently, you hear the statistics. What I want to talk about is money, if you haven't figured that out. And I'm not going to ask for your money. Here's the good news. If you're a guest, or maybe you've never been here, or maybe you've not been here in a while, or maybe you're here every week, we don't have a budget shortfall. This isn't a money grab. I don't have anything to ask for. In fact, if at some point you kind of don't like me, that's normal, and you don't like my motives, then you get to be the judge of that. Just please consider applying this somewhere else, because there's lots of great churches in town and lots of good organizations to work with in town, and most of them have their own building, so that makes your life easier. So just think about doing that there. But what happens to me over and over again is I bump into this thing called money, and we don't talk about it, and we pretend like it's not at the very center of how we're supposed to, or what can destroy our lives. And it seems that the overwhelming assumption is that all money problems are solved by having more. And actually part of what I want to delve into this morning is actually the more you have, the more angst that creates, especially if you're a Christ follower. Now, because I see that we don't talk about it, and because I have these conversations with people where I'm going like, oh, I can't believe you did that. I've overcompensated. So I have this, like, I underemphasize spiritual things to my kids, not because I don't find them to be valuable, but because of what I do, and I wasn't raised in a Christian home, so I don't want to mess them up. And so my deal with my kids is very much modeling based. Like, if the only thing they take away is Dad couldn't do life without getting up in the morning and spending time with God and reading his Bible, because I saw him do that every day of my life, then that's my win. But money, I talk about all the time. So much so that we were driving about a year ago. It was right around Dine and Dunk, which we'll do this year on September 11th, where we baptize a bunch of people and celebrate that way on the lake. And I can't remember if it was right after or right before, but my youngest was with me, and we were driving down the street, and he said, hey, Dad, I was thinking about getting baptized. And I was, really? It would be the last thing. I mean, not that he's like this heathen kid, but it's just like, he's not a very public person as it is. And he's like, really? So we had a little conversation. Then he said, but I was curious, does it cost money? Okay, I may have, because what I do is I come home and I sit over dinner and I'm like, you guys, you got to hear the stupid things this person did. I never tell them your name, but you got to hear this. So here's the question I want to ask, and again, it doesn't have a lot to do with us, but here or this place. Here's the question that I want to get you thinking about: is what causes your financial angst? Again, the angst isn't we have a budget shortfall. I just want to get you thinking about when you have stress as it relates to money. What is it? And if the only thing that I could prompt you to think about this morning is to begin to think about what's the pattern to it. Because what happens is we think it's an anomaly, we think it's a flat tire, we think it's someone got laid off, we think it's something, we think it's Christmas. What I want to suggest to you is it's highly unlikely that what you experience are a series of financial anomalies. But that instead what you have is a pattern. Now, my self-awareness is low too. I don't know if yours is. I don't see my patterns very well, but we are animals and we do have them. In fact, I don't hunt, but several years ago, one of my friends took me hunting. I'd never been before, and I actually shot a deer that day. It was fun, mostly because I didn't do any work other than show up and pull the trigger. But as we pulled in, I remember we pulled in, and I think I'd been hunting one other time in my life, and we were parking in the dark, and he was kind of explaining it was back in Billings, and he was like, okay, so over there's the Yellowstone River, you see the Yellowstone River, yep, and then there's these wheat fields down there, and then see over there, those trees, and he said, so here's what's going to happen. We're going to lay in this little kind of, behind this little hill over here that's between the river and this little wooded area over here, and what's going to happen is the same thing that happens every day. The deer who walk down to the river and into the fields to drink and eat during the night, they're going to walk back across the field to bed down in the trees, and when they walk by, we'll shoot them. It's like, so they do that every day. Yeah, they do that every day. That's what they do. And he began to, like, some of you were doing that yesterday, scouting out, trying to figure out what are they going to do so that you can shoot them in a couple of weeks with your bow and arrow. They have patterns. What I want to suggest to you is you do too. And if I can get you to begin to analyze what are they and what do they consist of? See, for some of you, and this isn't actually the one I really want to drill down on, but let's start there. For some of you, the pattern is, the angst is created by a lack of a plan. I mean, one of the patterns is like you just don't have a plan. And so you don't have a plan, and therefore you're constantly bumping into these moments where you have financial angst. Now, we can audit that, but like any audit, kind of like the physical before you played high school sports, it's not very comfortable. Nobody? Come on, that was good. Like, one of the most traumatizing days of your life was the first time you had to get a sports physical, right? Like, audit's always, it's uncomfortable. But there's some questions that we could ask that would expose the fact that your pattern is you don't have a plan. Like if you carry consumer debt on your credit card, and if it's growing, not shrinking, like that would say you lack a plan. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to point out, like, the reason you have a plan is because you arrive at or the reason I know that is because what that says is you spend more than you make. So maybe you have a terrible plan, but it says nonetheless that you lack a plan. Or if you have a flat tire and you kind of take the tire into the tire shop, and the guy at the tire shop's like, hey, see those stripes on the top of your tire? And you're like, yeah. And he says, those aren't racing stripes. That's called the steel bands in your tire. Like, your tire's shot. If the next time you get news that you need a new set of tires on your car, or the next time you realize that your dryer blew up and it's not going to work anymore, if that causes financial angst that's bigger than the inconvenience of the moment, or even the like, Lord, I don't know why you'd want me to spend $600 on that. Like, if that permeates days and weeks, or if it's still on the Visa card, that would say that you don't have a plan. Now, you might say, no, it would say I don't make enough money. And I would like to contest that for just a second. Because see, they still haven't invented a car with tires that don't wear out, right? And they still haven't invented a dryer that doesn't wear out. Now, I know I sound insensitive. Just please don't leave till we're done. But what that would say is when you drive the car off the lot, you know that it wears out, which means if you don't have a plan to replace what wears out, well, then you don't have a plan. Same with the dryer. It's why the people I respect, they're making themselves a car payment every month. Why? Because you know you're going to have to replace the car. You have a plan for that. Now, I remember the first time I passed my budget across the table to my friend Brian, and it was, I don't remember how many categories there were, like 2, like spend and save or something. I can't remember. But he passed it back and he's like, hey, I don't see clothes on your budget anywhere. I'm like, what do you mean you don't see clothes on there? He's like, well, are you going naked? I was like, well, no, I prefer if my wife does, but I'm not going naked. That's not my plan this year. He said, well, then there needs to be clothes in your budget. I'm like, well, but I'll just get clothes. No, you need to plan for it. And so ever since then, we've had a plan. And in fact, my wife gets $0 because I'm just kidding. Could push that one too far, couldn't I? We each, and this is kind of awkward, and part of the reason I want to give you some personal numbers is just to kind of go like, hey, we're all in this together, and we all got to work on this together. We each get $30 a month for clothes. Now, over a year, that doesn't translate to a whole bunch. It's why I don't live in Bozeman. Just kidding. But seriously, but you know what, as restricting as that sounds, because I grew up with a mom who worked retail. I love clothes. I'm effeminate that way. I'd love to have more money in clothes. Here's what I love about that is once you have the boundary, it's freeing. Like I walk by 406 twice a day because it's on my walk to work from my house. I love that place. Love the clothes there. Bought this shirt there like 6 years ago. But here's what happens to me is that because I've got these fixed number of dollars, and yeah, we supplement it with Christmas money, and that, like the great thing about being married is Christmas money, right? Like it's the only money of the year that's your money, but that's a different sermon. Like we supplement it with some of those things. But here's my point is it forces me to go, okay, so I'm not just going to go splurge spontaneously on a shirt because you know what? I haven't bought a new pair of jeans since February and I wear jeans professionally, so I kind of got to keep the rotation going. And I'm constantly going like, what do I need next? And I'm shopping for sales and I'm on Amazon looking for long sleeve shirts in July and short sleeve shirts. And you see what I'm saying? It just forces you to kind of know your boundaries. And therefore, I just kind of embrace them. I don't dry. I dry almost nothing because it ruins your clothes. And mine, they need to last for a while. I iron almost every day. I know no man in this room is going to respect me before we're done, but I don't go to Old Navy because they don't last. My point is simply this: when you have the boundary and the plan, there's so much freedom from it. When I see the guy at Macy's with the sign, I don't feel guilt, and I don't give to him. Because I've pre-decided, like, I give, but I've pre-decided, like, I don't give to that. So my point is simply this. If you constantly have angst from a lack of a plan, see, one of the dynamics, and we'll come back to this, is like, I don't want to suggest that we always have angst. It's like the Dos Equis guy, like, when you have angst, when do you have, I don't always have angst, but when I do, I have this kind. If it's from a lack of a plan, there's all kinds of downsides to that. You feel like a victim. You perpetually feel like your problem is an income problem. You constantly think that the answer to your financial problems is more. You feel guilt for what you do have because you're not even sure like where it all goes. There's other options, but part of what I wanted to talk about this morning, I'm kind of getting off track there, it actually has nothing to do with the type of angst that comes from lack of a plan. I actually want to talk to those of you who are Christ followers because part of what I've recognized in myself is there's a pattern, and it's not from a lack of a plan. It's actually, at the risk of sounding braggadocious, it's from the sheer responsibility of forming the plan. Like, there's a type of angst that comes because you don't have a plan, and there's a type of angst that comes because you're so aware of what you have And as a Christ follower, you go like, whoa, I'm responsible for this. And there's the type of angst that comes from not having a plan. And there's the type of angst that comes from like, God, love you, want my money to reflect that. Can I own a boat? Can I live in that? Is it okay that I don't spend $30 a month on clothes, but I spend $100? Like, there's a different kind of angst that just comes from like, I'm responsible for this, and how am I going to use it? And as much as not having a plan becomes pervasive, nearly permanent, and it elicits all kinds of shame, what I want to suggest to you is if we'll do the hard work of having the type of angst that comes from forming a plan, and we'll do that periodically, the advantage of that is once we form it, we have convictions. We don't have guilt because we've went like, Lord, I did the work. I'm working the plan. And we move forward in that. See, part of what stands out to me is in Matthew 6:33, there's this incredible sense of responsibility. Jesus is addressing a group of people just like us who were thinking about eating and drinking and wearing stuff. And they're like, what are we going to do? And Jesus says, don't worry about that. And then he says one of the most timeless and yet at times troublesome things he ever said. He said, but seek first his kingdom, his priority, and his righteousness, his character, and everything else will fall into place. Everything else will be given to you as well. Years ago, I got to teach this particular passage at Harvest, which is one of the churches that planted this one. My friend Greg and I cut down some aspen trees, put them on the stage. I had a gas chainsaw, and I taught tree pruning while teaching this sermon. It was a blast. The whole place smelled like gasoline. People sued us for years. It was perfect. But the reason we did that is because I had studied tree pruning, and what I learned, and there's exceptions to this, there's exceptions to everything, but what an arborist understands about pruning a tree is that for a tree to reach its maximum potential, what it has to have, and again, fruit trees are the exception, there's others, but in general, what a tree has to have is what they call a single central leader. That a tree, an arborist kind of picks out what is going to be the dominant, from the trunk to the highest point, what's going to be the dominant point, what's going to be the dominant fixture of this tree, and everything else acquiesces to that. So if something else grows up and rivals it, both in height or even in size, it's got to go. In fact, you've seen trees where there's two of them, and they make great devices to climb on when you're a kid, and terrible things in the midst of a storm. They call it a crotch. It forms a weak spot. It's susceptible to bugs and disease. The little shoots that grow off the trunk, like on our ash trees all over town, those are called suckers. They're a complete energy drain. They're a waste. See, what an arborist knows is, okay, for a tree to be healthy, we need this clearly defined branch, and so we make sure that it gets the bulk of attention and everything else goes second to that. That's what Jesus is saying here. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And yet what gets tricky is the one like, ugh. So what does that look like for someone who makes six figures? What does that look like for a single mom who's already on welfare? What do I do here? Here's what happened to me is I recognized that every August I have this angst, and it didn't make sense because I do have a plan. And it's taken me a few years to pick up on this, but ever since getting to be a part of Narrate and leading this, what I'm realizing is every August, late July, early August, there's this incredible angst, and I'm not very pleasant to be around, and I don't vacation well in August. I've stopped trying to do that. And the reason is because the formation of the plan it's overwhelming. See, our fiscal year around here runs September through August. And so what happens around here is in early June, Doris, our genius business administrator, she sends off emails to the whole staff, and they submit their budget requests for both the yearly total and what they're going to need in every individual month. And then she's taking all those and putting those together. And then simultaneously, what the council is doing is they're taking last year's giving, and they're trying to understand last year's and the year before and the year before that. And what we have to do is set a giving projection for next year, upon which families and all kinds of things are going to depend upon it, you all. And the deal is we don't sell widgets. The only income engine we have is that bucket that passes by you. And in fact, that's a value. The only engine we have is people who have so experienced God's grace and so buy into what we're trying to do and so trust what Jesus is trying to teach about stuff that they make that a priority. So we're going like, okay, here's $550,000 worth of requests. What's the giving going to be next year? And what I realized this last year is that it's stressful. Simultaneously, that means that you all have your seasons where you're getting your potential next year's budgets, whether you're projecting what your income will be as a business owner, or when you kind of get your 1 year and 10-year evaluation or whatever. Every August, Teresa and I are kind of re-looking at our own budget, because every August, if our income's going to change, it changes in September. And just to be totally candid with you, the last 3 years I've went to the council and went, guys, I do not need a raise. Please don't give me a raise. These people need raises and we need to do this and this, but I'm fine. Like, we make millions. It's perfect. Please don't worry about us. And I mean that. Like, we're and I'm not the only one with a job either, so we're fine. And every year, the last 3 years, the council once literally said, like, you need to leave the room. And the other time, figuratively, did email chains behind my back. And every time they overrode me and went like, no, here's what we're doing. Which means, much like you, there's this process in August of going, okay, so our income's going up to this. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? And here's the dynamic that happened to me, and this is so awkward. If you don't already think I'm pretentious, you will when we're done here. One of the dynamics was years ago when we started Narrate. Some of my friends and leaders in my life, they challenged Teresa and I to every September, and we've talked about this in the past, to raise our giving by 1%, to start at 10, and every year go up 1%. And the challenge there had many facets to it. But Teresa and I were like, yeah, we're going to do that. And this year, therefore, when I was looking at all that and then going like, okay, but I think there's some holes in our plan here, and I think we need to start working on this area and this area. I was also looking at the fact that our giving was set to go up to 17%. Now, I'm not asking for your sympathy or anything like that. Like, that's just what it was. And the reason Teresa and I have done that is because, listen, when we started this, we started it with $250,000. And it didn't come from a federal grant. And it didn't come from a single affluent person. It came from a community of Christ followers in Billings and another in Bozeman and a few more scattered across the state who so believed in what Jesus teaches about giving and local church and the gospel that they compiled resources and gave us $250,000 to start a church that most of them would never even visit in a town that many of them haven't been for decades. And we recognize, wait a minute, we are recipients of that grace. Rabbi Daniel Lapin says, he was asked once, he's a Jewish business thinker, he was asked once, well, what's the importance of budgeting your giving? And he said, in life there are givers and takers. Being a financial giver ensures that you're always among the givers in the world. We recognize, listen, it's not lost on me. My salary comes from those buckets. And maybe to a level of pride, there's part of me that goes like, I don't just want to receive, I want to be a part of that, and I want to be a competitive part of that. We also recognize what Jesus says in Matthew 6:21, where this is one of my favorite promises. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Wherever your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Now that's not a threat. It's actually a tool. Because what he's saying is if you want to be passionate about anything, send your money there. Like you want to be passionate about crocheting, spend some money on it. You want to be passionate about kids with AIDS in Africa, send some money there. And the reverse also becomes true. See, what he's saying is you can't have one without the other. Some of you are so sincerely trying to follow Jesus and get serious about him, and this is going to sound like the most convenient thing for a preacher to say, and you'll have to figure it out, but what Jesus is very clear on is there's simply no way to grow in your devotion to Jesus and leave your cash unconnected from that. And it's not like a threat thing. It's just the way we're wired thing. It just happens that way. Around church, and just to be clear, I don't have a clue what any of you give. That's part of the design. There's one person, and I don't want to be her ever. Someone has to. But around church, they say people stop attending, or they stop giving long before they stop attending. What is that? Because your heart, it follows your cat. And there's a guy, the first person who really helped me learn to follow Jesus, he's constantly in my ear going, Adam, the number of people who finish as well as they start is few and far between. He's in his 60s now, and I wouldn't say he's depressed, but he's very real about the fact that, Adam, the number of friends who I was serving Jesus with when I was 20 and 30, they just fall off. Few people start as well as they finish. And so, frankly, and I guess what I'm getting at is part of the Lord, I want to ratchet it up more because I know that I'm greedy and I got lots of wants and needs. And Jesus says that your desire for stuff is the first thing to take out your kingdom heart. And so we're just going to build this into our system. But you know what I didn't know? When I committed to going up 1%, all the holes in my plan. You know what I didn't know is what healthcare was going to cost in 2016. Did you? You know what I didn't know is how stinking expensive kids are. That I could drive a Mercedes-Benz for what I spend on groceries. I didn't. So I'm looking at this going, Lord, I committed to go up to 17%. And the reality is, if I'm going to have a good plan that reflects the fact that I need a new roof in 10 years, like whoever told me to buy a house, that person, that wasn't a favor. That thing's just a money pit. Like, if I'm going to save for a roof, not only can it not go up, I think I got to come down a couple percent. Because what I didn't know is, I didn't know what healthcare was going to cost. And it's not all needs either. Let's just be honest. I didn't know how much I would enjoy recreating with my family and how expensive a day on the lake or a day on the ski hill is. I didn't know that I would develop these hobbies that become expensive hobbies. I didn't know my kids would fall in love with baseball. And listen, kids sports are expensive. Travel sports are insane. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I would have this desire to actually go on vacations with my family and to take them to a Cardinals game. So my point is simply this, that there's a tension that comes from being flippant with your money. And there's a tension that comes from going, wait a minute, God, I make more than I ever imagined I would make. And it doesn't feel like enough. I don't know what to do. Lord, I so am serious about wanting to serve you, but I kind of think I should save for my retirement. So here's what happened to me. I'm in that mode, literally spreadsheets in my chair time, trying to figure it out, okay, maybe I can go to 15, maybe I can go, just kind of working the numbers. And so I'm like, Lord, send me a sign, right? I need a country music song and a good idea because I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do here. And I'm working right now through John Goldingay's commentary on the Old Testament, which is the Old Testament version of that New Testament one we have on the heat registers from N.T. Wright. And this just shows that God is both hilarious and I don't know what he's. So I get to Exodus 16. That's in the context of Lord, I need you to make me feel good about the fact that I'm going to go down because I kind of feel like a sellout. And that day I'm reading Exodus 16. Context of Exodus 16, Moses has just led the people of Israel out of Egypt, or God has led people out of Israel out of Egypt despite Moses is the way I think of it. Pharaoh went for a swim. Turns out he's not Michael Phelps. That problem's gone. They're on the other side of the Reed Sea. They're sitting around a campfire, and suddenly it occurs to them we don't have anything to eat but beef jerky. This is terrible. And they start getting nostalgic. Oh, remember what it was like back there? And they start talking about Egypt. And there's people on the background going wait a minute, you mean the place where they threw your son in the river when he was born? You mean the place where they took advantage of your women? You mean the place where they worked men 7 days a week and they died from physical? You mean, yeah, but the chicken was so good there. Listen to this. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you've brought us into the desert to starve the entire assembly to death. So they're ticked and Moses is ticked and God's okay, come on, let me figure this thing out. And so God says, let me just read it in verse 4. He says, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. So here I am going Lord, I kind of feel like I need to start saving for a roof and I got to save more in my health savings and I don't know that we're doing this right. And my budget categories, I looked from 4 years ago, I had 17. Today I have 29. I'm going okay, Lord, I want to be responsible. I'm trying to figure this thing out. And you tell me to read about the manna? Because the whole story of the manna is, just rely upon, just wake up in the morning and God will provide. And listen to the second part of this. I wasn't amused. You might be, but in this way, I'll test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. Now, this, to be honest with you, is why you'll never hear me say, I just read the Bible and do what it says. Because it's not honest. Nobody reads the Bible and does what it says. You can't. The responsibility of the Christ follower is to understand what was the character God was trying to shape in their culture, in their day, and how do we translate that to ours? I could wake up and go like, I was that guy. I was 22 and was like, you don't need a savings account and you don't need a retirement account, and all that reflects a lack of faith. But you know something? It's a completely different culture. You know what they didn't have? Grocery stores, IRA accounts. You know how you planned for your retirement? Sex. Lots of it. Because you needed kids who would provide for you when you were old. Kind of sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? Seriously, like that was the plan. That's how you did it. You didn't have to replace tires on your car. You didn't travel more than a couple miles from the place you were born over the course of your entire life. You didn't live in a culture where if you wore the same thing every day, people would never give you a job. It's a completely different world. We've got to translate it. And so I'm like, Lord, I don't know that that's helping. And I had this moment, and this is totally subjective, and you got to figure this out on your own. But here was for me the epiphany that I was seeking, and it was simply this: what if the angst is the answer? Like, what if periodically having that kind of angst about what you have and how you use it, what if that honors God? Now, could that be a cop-out? Of course it could be a cop-out. Could it lead to a slippery slope? Could we get over that, please? Everything could lead to a slippery slope. What if the process of you and your spouse and going, okay, Lord, we're here again. I got to get real. Here's what I'm making. What if that honors God? What if it's not about percentages, though I'm all for let's challenge ourselves. In fact, it's better than the alternative, isn't it? Isn't it better than the alternative of never going to the mat with God and saying, okay, God, I understand that you teach that I should be generous, and you teach kingdom first, and you teach all these things. And I live in a culture where there's a lot of crazy expenses that happen. God, how do I do? What if God is honored when you get real serious about planned, percentage-based, proportionate giving? And you're not just planning your giving, but you're planning your clothes and your next set of tires and that next car. I'm so grateful that someone taught me at 20 years old, Adam, for the rest of your life, you're going to make a car payment. You can either make it to the bank or you can make it to yourself. What if God is honored when we get that serious with our stuff? You know, there's a counsel guy who has been such a gift to me, and one of the things he said over and over is, I would bring him this, some kind of answer that comes with a question, whether it was financial or some kind of decision, and I remember the first couple of times he said it, it was just like, wow. He said, Adam, what I see here is the evidence that you've been attentive to the details. You've worked the numbers, you've paid attention to the facts. And then he would say, I don't need to understand all the details. I'm willing to rest assured that someone does, and this is the recommendation you're making. What if God is far more interested in you going to the mat with him over your finances than he is going, here's your percentage, and just live it out robotically? It strikes me that if the angst you have is from a lack of a plan, then that angst it's almost perpetual. It almost never goes away. And at the same time, it's full of all kinds of shame. Whether it's the shame of $10,000 on your credit card and you understand you're living on more than you make, or it's the shame when you start your boat or your jet ski or go to your cabin, because there's a sense of I don't even know if I was supposed to do this. And then there's the type of angst that comes from getting serious and being responsible and going to the mat with God and going, okay, Lord, all my cards are on the table. I love you, and I got a daughter who wants to do ballet. I love you, and I need a roof. I got these wants and needs, and we got to figure this thing out. What if it's a bit of a red flag if it's been a while since you've had that kind of angst? I mean, I wonder if part of what it means to be an adult is to recognize there's a difference between worry and stress. Worry indicates we're not trusting God. Stress reminds us that life is hard. I just wonder, maybe some kind of cyclical angst where you get real close to your finances and pay real close attention to what your priorities are. What if that is a God-honoring thing? Listen, if you're someone here and your angst is from not having a plan, I would love to serve you. There's lots of ways we could do that. All of them will kind of be like your high school physical, because there's no way to talk about money without just kind of going like, let's get it on the table. There's a couple that teaches a Financial Peace University, a Dave Ramsey thing every fall. They're going to do it again this fall. We'd love to connect you with them. I've got a lot of friends who are pretty good at budgeting, would love to connect. I'll meet with you. You just have to step forward. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. You leave us your name and email, and after we sell your information to Taiwan, we'll call you this week. And if you're someone that, like, you have a plan, could I just challenge you on a couple things? Like, is it the same plan you had 10 years ago? And what else are you doing now the same way you did it 10 years ago? But I do think as Christ followers, we have a responsibility to grow in our generosity. And if there's a way that we could be a part of that conversation with you, would love to do that. And there's a third thing, and I guess it's the elephant in the room, and let's just name it. This place exists only if people buy into what God teaches. And that's not something we want to hide from. It's actually right center of what we do. That we want to be the kind of place that is driven by people who are owners, who believe in the vision of that. And so it's so easy to assume that Narrate happens because there's some affluent people who have extra and they give us a lot. And could I just challenge that for just a moment? The more you have, it doesn't get easier to give, it gets harder. Kind of like if you didn't have a quiet time when you were in high school, you're never going to have one when you have 2 kids. Because life only gets busier. There's no dude writing gigantic checks. There's people just like you who have a fixed amount of resources, who are getting serious with God and going, okay, Lord, I want to follow your lead. And I want to operate without shame and without guilt and with generosity, and I want to do that freely. And to those of you that are part of that, we're grateful to serve Helena and God with you. Let me pray. God, so many dynamics, and it's time of year where with school starting and college kicking into gear, I mean, it's the wrong time to feel like we have any extra. Lord, I pray for people whose desire for you is sincere, and yet their money's unattached to that conversation, that you would give them the courage to begin to navigate those waters. Jesus, thanks that in a world that is at times so intangible and so nebulous, serving you and knowing you sometimes is so driven by emotion and feeling and mood. Thanks for the wisdom of the tangibility of not just our time, but our stuff. God, I pray that for people here who they're doing it, that there would be an attaboy and attagirl, an affirmation, and that they would finish better than they started. Amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.